Hey besties, it's Juju, KP and TT. Tools down, time to chat work, life, well-being and relationships.
And you're listening to
Let's Take It Offline.
Welcome back to this week's episode of Let's Take It Offline. How are we all today?
So good.
I'm excited about this week's topic.
Are you?
Yes.
Me too.
I've been thinking about it all week.
TT, you look really tan. What's been happening?
You know what? I just came back from a surf this morning and it was one of the best surfs I've had in a long time. So I'm very happy about that. And I feel like we just have really good energy going today. Like sometimes when you feel like you're in a room and then the energy is great. That's how I feel at the moment. And had a really good week. Spent a few days in Melbourne.
Oh, yeah, you were there for work, right?
Yeah, we had a startup event there and I got to meet a bunch of founders and, it's just really cool to listen to their story and then have a chat about how we can help them. And then the three of us went to Dua Lipa.
Oh, yeah,
the
we
week
did.
before.
Oh, my God, it was so good.
It was so good.
It
She
was.
is next level amazing.
She is incredibly hot.
And so hot. Like,
Yeah.
And one of the things that she was saying was that, when I think in 2016 she came and performed in front of like 300 people in a concert hall. And then 2018 she was a supporting act for Bruno Mars.
Yes.
Which we were there and we didn't even pay attention to her.
no one pays attention to supporting acts. Oh, my
but
goodness.
then now she has her own stadium world tour. Like,
It's crazy.
if you think
crazy.
about like if you put your intention out there and just keep grinding and keep working at it,
Yep.
look how far you can go.
Yeah.
Gaga's the same. She's
Not to say that we're going to have a stadium
Gaga's
tour, but
Yeah, she's like, as long as you put your mind to it, you can do anything. Because I remember seeing her as a supporting act for the Pussycat Dolls years ago,
wow.
and she was better than the Pussycat Dolls. Crazy, right?
interesting. KP, you just share some really exciting news.
Yeah, so that's why I'm excited about this week's podcast. It's all about side hustle. I've been working on my side hustle, which is going more into yoga teaching, and I've booked my first public class.
My goodness, we'll be
Yeah,
there.
so
We'll be there.
I'll be
Yeah.
teaching during December, and I'm just really excited to see like how I can. It will be a really good test of how I can manage like full-time work with something on the side as well. But the side thing being something that I'm more passionate about than
I think time management,
my full-time job, yeah.
and you're gonna have to, and socials, and trying to balance all of that.
Yeah.
In
But
with
hey,
corporate.
we're going to Rufus right after, right? So
Yeah.
you will have balance for sure.
I've got one. I think I've got one of the hardest teaching time slots.
That's true.
5:30
Yeah,
on a Friday.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like
right.
whoever shows up is gonna be either in a rush to get out to go to dinner on a Friday night, or like who doesn't have much on and looking for something like Zen. So it's like you have to cater for two audiences.
Yeah,
That's
true.
usually me. I've been to 5:30 classes when I have nothing on,
yeah.
and then I'm like, okay, home time. I'll go rest,
But
Netflix, chill.
It's the best as well because you're usually the only students there. So
Yes.
yeah, you
Yeah.
get a lot of attention and
Yeah.
a bit more instruction from the teacher.
Yeah, I'd be happy if there was one student that
Oh,
shows
there'll be
up.
at least two.
Okay, great.
We'll be there.
Yes.
We'll be there.
And Jules.
Oh my goodness, I've been so busy. I've started myself a new, and this is great actually for this week's episode because I've started a new TikTok account plus a blog that is attached to that.
What is your TikTok account name?
My TikTok account name is Dollar Dame Finds. So if anyone is listening out there wants to know cool gadgets, products that you never thought you needed, come check me out. So yeah, it's been
Help
a
her go
whirlwind.
viral.
Yes, please help me go viral as well as this podcast, please. Thank you.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think everyone's had a pretty good week, and today's weather is awesome. Hence why TT looks very tan because she was probably out surfing this morning. But as everyone has already heard, this week's episode is all about starting a side hustle. We're going to talk about how you balance a side hustle with also a full-time job, and is it potentially something that you are going to get into and divert away from your corporate job? And is it even a viable source of income? I think that's really important because you still want to maintain your lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is, are you still going to feel fulfilled? Because I know we had our career episode a couple episodes back, and there's so many things that we need to find to help fulfill us in our careers. So whether this side hustle scenario is going to actually make you feel more fulfilled, or you're going to become so busy that you don't have time to spend to balance with yourself.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And we are also going to perhaps discuss why we got into our podcasts, where to begin, what to try, and what are the key measures of success. And I mean, we're still early on our journey. I think, you know, we're not here to provide any sort of professional advice whatsoever, but more a means of what are the things that you can do and start to think about if you do want to branch out from that corporate job. That's what this week is all about.
That sounds good, Jules. So yeah, I think we just want to start with a few things that, you know, potentially you want to consider when you start thinking about having a side hustle, right? Because there's this whole culture of like, I finish my 9 to 5 and then I go straight into my 5 to 9. And you know, it might not be for everyone. And I know that a lot of people are just very much happy to finish their day job and go on to play sport or, you know, hang out with friends or go to the beach, and that's completely fine. But if side hustle and, you know, having something outside of your job is what you've been thinking about, then the very first thing that we want to chat about today is really start with why. And I stole the title from Simon Sinek, of course. I love that book. But, you know, with everything that we do, I just want to start with why. Like, why do you want to start a side hustle, right, in the first place? Well, first of all, are you not fulfilled at the moment in your job or, you know, just in your life in general? So if you're not feeling fulfilled, then maybe it's not really the job. Maybe it's something happening in your personal life or in your or your orbit. Could be friends, could be family, could be partner that makes you feel a little bit like wonky and you just want to do something different for a change. If that's the case, then maybe it's better for you to just look at what you need to change in the personal side of life, and not jump straight into a side hustle, because that might, you know, stress you out and complicate things even more.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, TT, is a good point, right, is they don't realize why they're starting it. They look at things because other people are really successful in those things and they want to do it. Like, for example, I was watching $1 Million Listing and I'm like, oh, I should become a real estate agent. And I looked into it and then I thought, actually, too hard basket because I have to go and get my license and then I don't have much of a network in the, you know, in that industry. So it looks easy and that's what you see on TV, but I'm sure in reality, they're working around the clock. Weekends are all gone.
100%.
I think it's like you can't with side hustles. I think some people are really lucky and it takes off straight away.
Yeah,
like you could get like your first video as an influencer could go
Went
viral, right?
Yeah.
It happens, but in reality, there's a lot of hard work that goes on in the background to make something successful, and it's like that. But seeing what the transition point of moving from like full-time to straight to full-time into your side hustle is a really gray area. You have to, I think, consider if it's worth the time and effort to really invest in doing a side hustle and how big you should go when you start.
Yeah, and then if you're feeling like you're not 100% fulfilled in your day job, then I guess before you jump into starting a brand new business, maybe ask the question like, maybe have I been in this role for too long? Am I not getting enough responsibilities? I don't feel like I'm challenged, I'm learning new things. And have a chat with your manager or, you know, looking at maybe, you know, is it a new side hustle? Is it actually changing to a new career path?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The other thing is your passion. What are you passionate about?
Yeah.
What what gets you up in the morning and why should you go and do it? If you're passionate, like for example, KP is passionate about her mindfulness and yoga. So that's why she's doing what she's doing today.
I think one of the telltale signs is also like I would teach for free. If I had time. Like I think that's a really good defining characteristic of if you're passionate about it, if you would do it for free.
Yeah.
And And
I got to think about all the things I'm doing for free right now.
yeah, because you love shopping, you love finding gadgets.
That is true.
Wine, right?
And that's a great point, right? Because when you first start out a hustle, like it would take you quite a bit of time to get to a point
Yes.
where you get paid for it.
Yeah.
So for a period of time, it could be even like a few months or a few years, you're not getting any money out of it.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, it's risk rewards, right? Like if you actually think that you can change things at your job that will actually make you perform better and have a higher potential earning there, then why not do that instead
Yeah.
of like starting something for like a while with no income whatsoever?
Yeah, unless like you have, like you said, going back to the point around passion, like you really need something to really fuel you to keep you going whilst you're like getting something off the ground running.
It's
Yeah.
your why. It's your why. Like,
Yeah.
why do you need to do this?
Yeah.
What are the reasons? And then if you use passion to fuel you, then it's like you're motivated individually, not by other variances around you,
Yeah.
not by what other people are doing because of their wealth, or not by what you see on TV,
Yeah.
etc.
And there's so many different conversations around quiet quitting now as well. Like when you so quiet quitting is when you are in a job and you are thinking about like the next move, whether it's a different job, different company, but you're just like doing the bare minimum at your work and not really invested anymore. And, you know, it's funny. And, you know, I know these guys are going to laugh at me for it, but it's almost like when you're in a relationship, right? And it's so bad. It is really, really bad when you're in a relationship and you're like, you know what? I'm not 100% into this person, but I would just keep plodding along until I find someone else. Yeah. Kind of like that, no?
I mean, it's funny because a lot of people do it without realizing.
Yes.
Yeah,
You know,
true.
divorces happen probably exactly like that
Yeah.
until they're like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore, and then they divorce.
Yeah. But this episode's about side hustles.
I
Yes.
know.
love.
Bring it back.
Tangent.
So
Yeah.
so I guess it's just to sort of illustrate a point of like have a little bit of reflection time in your work week to kind of understand where you're at, like your level of energy, whether you're enjoying what you're doing or you need to change things up, whether it's your routine, whether it's a job, whether it's a different company, before you jump into something like a side hustle, because it's going to take you time and effort and you're not going to get rewarded straight away.
Yeah.
Unless you have a really good why. And if then you decide, you know what, I am happy in my job, I have the bandwidth, like I don't mind spending a bit of time in the evening to spend on building something of my own. And that could be because, you know, financially you just have like maybe a live event coming up that you want to save a bit more money for,
Yeah.
or you just want to save up for a mortgage, for example, and you want to just like find a bit more cash, then you know that's also a very good way to you know, think about why you would want to do a side hustle. And then the next thing as well is maybe you're in that transitioning phase in your life and you are in a job where you're pretty happy, but then you also want to go down the path of like 4-hour work week, like Tim Ferriss book.
Yeah.
And you want to experiment with different things to see where you're at and what you can do.
Yeah. I think one of the things, it's such a good point you raise around like the timing of everything and reassessing, because I think in our generation with millennials and Gen Zs and the new generation is that we have short attention spans and we're
Yeah.
impatient. So doing a stock take in a way, or an audit of your life before deciding whether you want to do something major, such as starting a side hustle, quitting and going down a completely different career path.
Yeah.
Timing is everything. So do an audit of how you're feeling about it all.
Yeah. And I think it's very tempting, like, to jump straight into something because, as Jules said, like, on Instagram or on TV shows, everyone talks about like, oh, like I was so successful in my e-commerce business outside of my job. And, you know, it's very easy to fall into that trap. But, you know, that's what I'm trying to work on at the moment as well, which is, you know, I love my job, but I think, you know, coming from a family where my parents own their own business, I've always thought about, you know, one day I want to be, you know, my own sort of boss and have my own business. But I don't necessarily want to jump into anything right now. It's more spending a bit of time to explore all of my interests and really narrow down my why before I just jump my gun and do something completely left field, for example.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think recently, and perhaps it comes with age, is you start to realize the type of people you want to work with and how a lot of our corporate roles, you don't really have a choice. You deal with a lot of dickheads day to day. And it's true, right? Because all of the things that we talked about in our career podcast is what are those pillars that you would think about from your corporate role? What are the things that actually makes you move? It's the role, it's the manager, it's the organization. I'm at a stage in my life where I'm a bit of a no bullshit point where I have really low tolerance for people, and for a lot of simple things I can't handle. And so depending on what role you're in, and I'm in a sales role where I have to be pretty much switched on all the time.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about how do I get that freedom? And being probably my own boss is essentially the idea of where I want to get to. So I don't have to deal with a lot of, as I say, dickheads in the world. And those dickheads could be my manager. Maybe he's having a bad day that day. Or could be my partner, could be my friend. That just rubs me up the wrong way. I used to be able to be like, yeah, whatever, I don't care, flick it off your shoulder. But now I just evaluate things a little bit more in terms of what I will tolerate and what I won't.
All great points to consider. I guess in summary, we just wanted to chat about the why, because if you have a very strong why, it will make the whole thing easier, because it will help you keep motivated, stick with it even though it's hard. Because I know in the past I've started and stopped so many times with different sort of side hustles in quotation marks, but nothing really has picked up because I don't think I've found something that aligned to my values yet. And doesn't mean that I'm not going to keep looking, but just saying that before you waste your time doing something, just think a bit more about the why. But then other considerations, once you've decided, yes, I'm going to do this, is where do you even start, right? Like what side hustle do you want to start? And we can touch about that in a bit. Recently, I've come across this concept for a while now, and I bought a book called Ikigai. It is a Japanese sort of concept where you find, like the sweet spot in a Venn diagram between, what you're passionate about, what the world is lacking, and also what will make you money. And then if you can find the midpoint of all of that, that's probably where you find your niche.
Yeah. The other, I also have one that I can add there. I've recently read this book called 0 to 1, and it's about how some companies start from basically zero and grow. And one of the things they talked about was the concept of discovering the niche, because the way you become successful in your side hustle is this concept of being the monopoly. And to monopolize, you can either try to expand and scale and monopolize the market, or you can find your niche and be really good at it, and then monopolize the niche first.
Back in marketing school, there was a concept of red ocean and blue ocean. So red ocean is where there's already a whole bunch of people in that space already competing for very minimal sort of market share. Whereas if you can find a blue ocean and swim there by yourself outside the bloody red ocean, that's a much better space to be in, right? And, it's tough to think about, the blue ocean these days, because I feel like in this day and age, everything has been thought about.
Yeah.
And there's so many different startups and so many different businesses covering the red ocean. But if you can really find the blue ocean and go swim there, that will be ideal.
Yeah.
A lot of people use that as certain experiences they have. A couple of companies I've worked for in the past, even the one I'm working for now, is they have a really bad experience with tech or with something, and they come up with their own technology stack that solves that problem a lot better than what else is out there in the market, and then that's how they ramp.
These are really big companies and startups, so I guess we could look at side hustles can also be starting quite small. Like
Yeah.
if you're passionate about like scrapbooking,
Mm-hmm.
you can start a scrapbooking business, like something as small as that. You don't have to
Sounds like
dream.
sounds like something Kathy thought about.
You don't need to like necessarily think grand and scale.
Yeah,
You
that
can
is
do
so
something.
true.
Yeah, you can do something that you're just passionate about on the
Yeah.
side that you want to.
And then there's
do.
a spectrum of it as well. Like I know so many people who have started out of COVID, especially like a side business doing things like cookies, right?
Yeah.
I met someone at work recently who is still in her full-time job, and then her weekend job will be to bake cookies. And because cookies are not really perishable, you can keep it for longer. And then she will just have to focus on big orders, for example. And then also like there's so many stories of people started, like soy wax candles, and then completely quit their job to do that. So
Yes. Someone in my team recently did that.
there you go. So
Yeah.
then the next question is probably like when do you know is a good time to walk away from your day job, right?
Yeah.
And it's very personal again, depending on where you are in terms of your financial situation, whether you can afford to, let your side hustle completely fund your lifestyle, or you want to like have that security of having like a very solid business first before you walk away from your corporate job. Because, as a small business owner, think about the things that you're missing out on in terms of like subsidized health funds, for example, superannuation. How do you pay yourself? How do you think about all of the perks and benefits? Because when you get paid for a corporate job, it's also a full package of things that comes with that too.
Yeah. Like you might be comfortable and not having necessarily that full like financial backing, but you need to consider things that you'd be walking away from. Like for example, you might need to move back home with mum and dad,
Yeah.
right? Because you can't have the outlay of rent regularly, or you would need to give up on your car and take public transport. So those are like the cost benefits of it. If you were to just like walk away from a job the first day, it's not just the income that you're working away from, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think we do know of quite a few interesting examples of where people have done that. And in the next few sort of side hustle episodes, we'll have more guests to come on and talk about their own journey as well, which I'm very excited to share with you. But yeah, so it's super exciting when you start that journey, because then you're running your own business. So then the question is, how do you want to run that business? You want to co-found something with a colleague or a friend? Do you need help in terms of like taxation, in terms of legal advice? And like sometimes there's a domain of expertise. Like for example, I'm not a technical person at all, so if I want to start a business that has anything to do with coding, I'll need to get some help. Either a co-founder, a partner, or outsource it to Fiverr, for example. So it's good to kind of do a bit of a business plan as to what needs to be done, and then sit down with yourself and your co-founders or your business partners to talk about who's good at what, and then let's divide and conquer to get it all done.
It's just leveraging each person's skill set, right? And a good example is probably us three. Although we're in a obviously full-time corporate role at the moment, we've got different people doing different things depending on their own skill set, and we're kind of dividing and conquering in that sense as well. So leverage that as much as you can, because it's such a time saver. You're not going to be able to do everything yourself.
Yeah,
Exactly.
And I talk to so many founders, like these are like proper startup founders, not just side hustles. But if you're a lone founder, if you're starting your business by yourself, it's a very, very lonely journey, because you don't really appreciate the fact that you have a team around you when you're in a corporate job, right? You have a manager to tell you what to do. You have
interactions on a regular basis with people socially.
But when you're going on your own, it's like, you have to discipline yourself. You have to motivate yourself. You have to set out your KPIs and how to achieve them. You don't actually have the sort of safety net of the people around you anymore. So again, that's something to consider before jumping head in.
A lot of the people that I know that work for themselves, they work very hard and they work all hours of the day because it's their own business. So that, maybe that's something to also think about, is be mindful that you're not gonna have less time. You're probably going to actually have more things to do because you're taking all of that on yourself. And do you have those skill sets that you're outsourcing? Sure, but because everything's on you to increase your income, you want to increase your income. It's one of those things that you probably have to balance out before you decide, okay, I'm going to do this full time.
And if it's only income that you are after, then it's probably not a bad idea to stick with your corporate job, do better so that you can get either promotion or more commission, and then invest that money into, you know, real estate or stock or whatever, because then it's probably a safer path rather than starting a business.
In that case, your side hustle would be as an investor.
Yeah,
right?
and there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
And we can chat about that in other episodes as well, because there are other avenues outside of your usual sort of public company investing or real estate. But so far we've talked about starting with why, all the things that you should consider before you dive headfirst into a side business or a side hustle. But I'm curious in terms of like the ideas that, you know, some of our listeners might be interested in terms of what they can start.
Yeah, I think that ideas like we talked about just now, like actually like starting a business and maybe scaling, but there are like lots of easy ways that you could dip your toes in it that's maybe a little less time and effort, and also less startup capital that's required to get going. And one of the really popular ones during COVID was definitely drop shipping and e-commerce, doing like fulfillment by Amazon, or finding products on Alibaba or AliExpress and creating a website off Shopify or GoDaddy and creating a drop shipping business is quite straightforward. And a lot of what then comes up on top of that is your marketing and your branding, and also picking the right products in a particular niche, right?
Yeah. And for that type of business, you can actually go online and search for like the most looked for item on Google, for example, or some of the websites around like searching for trends, and you can actually find out like the most searched keywords, for example.
Yeah.
And that's a really good way to start. In terms of, like, you know, there's enough interest there in that market for me to think about doing drop shipping, because once you secure the supply, you also have to do, as KP said, a lot of marketing to get the brand going, and probably a lot of like advertising through Facebook, through Instagram as well.
There's on that one as well, like you can either drop ship and just find a product, or if you go into full e-commerce, you would need to actually find a supplier or a manufacturer to create the product that you actually want to be created. So I've got two friends during COVID who one started drop shipping and the other one started an actual product e-commerce business. And I think that like the margins tend to be a lot higher if you're actually creating a product that's unique and in a niche, rather than drop shipping itself, because the other things you need to consider in those businesses, you have to consider after customer care as well. Warranties, that you have to deal with all of that. And if you don't have a good drop shipping product, or that it takes forever to arrive from China, then
10 weeks till delivery.
Yeah, there's a lot of time and effort in keeping that business alive that might not be worth the returns and profits. But it is probably one of the easier ways to get going.
I did look at this actually during COVID. I took one of those founder courses I paid for, and it was all about the founder of Founder. She actually started off putting tea.
Greta Van.
Yes, Greta Van.
You know who we're talking about. She did skinny tea.
That's right, skinny
tea. She did the horse, the watches.
The watches, where she sells those watches once per year.
She's pretty much like the queen of e-commerce.
It is crazy. But, you know, the course is actually really good, but it's all about finding those niche products. You know, there were guys out there that were selling those magnetic eyelashes because it was the most trending thing on Instagram at the time. And so they're just finding those unique items on Alibaba, rebranding it, and then making sure that they advertise on Instagram, on TikTok or whatever, and it becomes a viral product to buy. And they made millions.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But millions probably not in like net profit. millions in
probably
revenue.
yeah.
So once again, you need to build that business
Yeah.
plan to see if it's worth it.
And also, as you said, like whatever that was trendy as at that time, but how long can that business last,
Exactly.
right? Before you have to move on, and also think about the impact of what you're doing as well.
Yeah.
Whether that aligns to your values. Like I feel like, some of those businesses is actually feeling consumerism and probably not doing great for the planet in terms of how much more is generating in terms of like
like fast
goods
fashion and all
I
that stuff.
definitely think it's
Packaging.
short-lived.
Yeah.
It's short-lived for sure. And I was one of those suckers that bought one of those magnetic lashes. And I can tell you, they don't work. They really don't
It's
work.
all marketing. They got you.
By
They
the
got,
way,
they trapped
like,
you.
if
Have to
you
give it a
have
go.
something to sell, like Jules is the best
She's the
person.
best guinea
She
pig.
would buy it any day.
That would be that. This is such a good segue into another idea around starting a side hustle, which is massively on the rise, and it's all about the micro influencer or the TikTok Instagram influencer, where a lot of people started. I especially what I've seen is that a lot of friends are passionate about food and being foodies, so they've started.
We've got one in the room right
Yeah,
here.
we got one
That's
in the
me.
room right here.
Jules
Yeah.
has been filming fit.
Yeah, do you
Asian
wanna,
recipes?
Do you want to talk about your experience there?
Yeah, I think with that experience, it's been pretty hard. You have to really create content every day. And what I found was I would be cooking something yummy at home, and the idea was I would cook something delicious, but it was still very healthy and using healthy ingredients. And it was a lot of Asian food, and a lot of Asian food has got either high salt content, MSG,
High carb.
sugar, carbs. So I was trying to keep fit but still eat super tasty food. And I thought, you know what, this would be awesome to just post on Instagram. Maybe there are people out there that like my recipe. I mean, the guys and gals I hang out with joke about it all the time. They're like, oh, we'll come over to your house to have dinner, and they call it the street of where I lived in is what they call it, but I won't obviously tell you where I live. But that experience has been very time consuming. Is when I'm cooking something, I have to make sure, I've got a camera set up ready to go, and I have to be very consistent in my posting. And I can tell you, I've been very inconsistent with my posting. So I'm not really getting the hits that I want. So I haven't put like a cadence in from a business point of view to ensure that I post a cooking video weekly, monthly, whatever it may be. So I think definitely consistency is key.
Yeah. That just shows you how much actual time and effort you need to spend. And you're back to the point about passion and what fuels you. You have to be actually interested in
That is-
whatever
yeah.
it is. Like
100%,
the
yeah.
fit Asian recipes. Like if it was like just someone that said, oh, there's a niche in the market and I want to
Yeah.
do fit Asian recipes. Like it's just, you're just doing it for the sake of like
Yeah.
doing it, but like
Yeah.
you're actually interested.
Yeah.
And also on the flip side, and that's such a great point, because I feel like a lot of the influencers didn't really start out thinking that they will make money
I don't
out
think
of it.
so at all. Yeah.
Like they started out because they actually love food, or
Passion,
they
yeah.
love to share. Like I've found a few influencers on TikTok where like they cook and they talk and they share a story, and I find that really beautiful. And then they amass like a followership because of that.
Yeah.
And then from there they start to get sponsorship. But they didn't start out thinking, well, I'm gonna start like a side hustle being an influencer.
yeah,
you know?
exactly.
So that's something else to think
Yeah.
about. Like if you really tune into what you love,
Yeah.
and that you can do day in day out without getting sick of it, that's a really good sign.
To caveat as well is that because you're not going to make money straight away, you do need to have a pretty large amount of following before you start hitting up
Monetizing.
particular brands for affiliate programs. There are some out there that are free, so you can start with those, sure. But most of the marketing companies will say, all right, prove to me that you have X amount of followers. How many times did you promote our products? And how did you go about it? Did you get any sales from your links, etc.? So you have to really prove your value to them and why they should use you.
And like number of impressions, how many likes, how many people interacted with the post. So yeah,
It's actually, I reckon it takes more time like editing than filming.
Oh,
We
yeah.
can talk about how long it takes us to even edit some of our podcasts,
Yeah.
right? Like
Jules
Jules, yeah, Jules has been
I'm the
great.
I'm the techie.
She's our CTO. She's
Yeah.
technical officer.
Yeah, but on the topic of creatives, there are other ways that you can make start a side hustle based on like the skill set you have. Like for example, Etsy is a really popular platform for digital products, and people will sell templates on there. And I've
Yeah.
seen it myself, like
Yep.
Excel templates for a travel plan
Yeah.
or your tax return
I-
or wedding planning as well.
Or
Yeah.
like again therapy talk, but
Yeah.
you can actually create these washes around how to heal from grieving process.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
like how to find out what your core values are.
Yeah.
Our Etsy search history is completely different. But
Very different. And also like part of that as well, I did see that you can publish your own, book through Amazon, and
Yes.
then like it doesn't print until
Someone
someone
buys.
buys the book. Seen it where people
Made to
actually
print.
or they create like like 2023 planner or daily journaling
Yes.
sort of book, and then people just buy and then it gets printed. So then again, like it's a really good way to, if you don't want to deal with like suppliers, you don't want to deal with stock, for example, that's a really good way of starting like a digital product.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm
offering.
talking to one of my customers right now, because this is exactly what we pitch is when you go down different product lines, think about whether it's going to be made to order, because you're minimizing supply
Inventory,
chain
yeah.
costs, logistics. You're also not incurring costs from a warehouse storing.
Yeah.
And so you're saving on space, so you don't need to go and rent out this
Yeah.
huge warehouse. So it's kind of similar thing. Think about some of the products that's not going to have a lot of overheads, or even they could be digital courses. There's so many different
Yeah,
niches
digital
out there.
courses are so popular. It's like because it's scalable. You
Yeah.
create it once and then you can just keep selling it.
Yeah.
Just like the other thing is like Instagram presets, right? Like a color scheme. Like so many influencers sell that. What else is available out there that's like a creative
Editing.
Editing,
There's all these
yeah.
editing apps, new editing apps that come up for either TikTok or Instagram.
Yeah.
There's
Canva templates.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a site called Maven that you can actually go and like publish your courses, and there's so many of them out there, but you can publish your own courses and people will pay to do that. And some of them actually cost like $1,000, for example. Like,
Yeah.
and then think about like once you get your course out there, if you amass like 100 people even to pay $1,000 each, and it works out to be a pretty good like
Yeah, that'd be
return on investment in terms of your time. Right?
Yeah, 100 people buying your stuff. That's like $100,000. So
Yeah,
for
exactly.
one time,
And some of the courses, like for example, make better decisions.
Should we do a course for people
Like,
on how to make better decisions?
Not saying that the content's not great, but like you have like you've built up so much experience in your corporate work that you can probably share. And I think, for example, like product management is something that has been super popular recently. And like, if you have been in project management, if you've been in marketing and you have something to share with people, don't do it for free, or do it for free at first and then think about how you monetize that.
Yeah, do it for free, build a following, and then monetize.
Yeah.
And coming back to Greta Van Riel, by the way, is her name. I actually bought one of the e-commerce learning course, and as you say, TT, it was $1,400. What am I doing with it? Nothing.
You should put it on your Dollar Dame website in TikTok. Do a review of it.
It keeps coming back to this point is you need to have that genuine passion.
Yeah.
As much as I love shopping, I don't want to run like a shopping business and think about all of the different niches. I'm probably more on the creative influencer side. For me, I enjoy that way more than actually thinking about, okay, how am I going to monetize this? I need to do marketing for this. I need to think about logistics and operating and drop shipping. like doing that on your own with a full-time job is actually intense.
Yeah. And then the last idea that we sort of talked about between the three of us is as well like freelancing or providing a service. So in KP's case, for example, like she's teaching yoga on the side and is very much like ad hoc at the moment.
Yeah.
And then hopefully at some point she can build that up. But I'm a qualified personal trainer, so I can also do that as well. But at the same time, I'm also very, very much enjoying like doing my morning surfs before before work. So like, where do I fit that in, right? But you can also provide like consulting services, like marketing consulting, sales consulting, and things like that as well. There's just so much that even with therapy, right? We talked about using a coach, for example. So you can become a life coach, you can become a voice coach. And probably what you need to start doing there is to take a few of those like coaching certifications and then build that into a repeatable sort of template that you can use with different clients.
Yeah.
In terms of getting started, perhaps we can have a chat about maybe how we got started, which most people essentially know that it was just a conversation over some mud crabs. But what are the things that we had to go and do and think about before we actually got this podcast up and running?
And I'm happy to talk about TT and I think we've done the health side of the business. That's also different as well. In terms of more like legal things that we had to do to actually go into that profession.
Yeah.
I think the thing with us is that we actually started out with our why.
Yeah.
Right. We did a lot of planning around why we wanted to do the podcast and what we wanted to communicate on it. And we actually set out and wrote an outline of the why and also the topics that we wanted to cover over a series of episodes. That's how we all started. Eventually, making it real became the next step. Making it real. How do we execute? Yeah.
A business plan, pretty much.
Yeah.
And in our case, it's probably very simple.
Yeah.
Because the three of us can easily get together and just nut out like a few hours together. But, you know, basic things like even getting a logo done, Fiverr, because none of us are that great with Photoshop. Jules is pretty good, but yeah, to start something like to draw a logo from scratch, we use someone on Fiverr. We also sort of thought about like our social media strategy, how often we post, what sort of content. And then Jules invested in our chief technology officer.
Yeah, that was probably the hardest part.
Invested time to actually look at all of the equipment that we needed for recording.
Yeah.
And, you know, at some point it might be worth sharing a photo of how we started versus where we are. And hopefully one day we'll have our own studio. But, you know, that's probably a good check-in. Other things, do you want to start a business entity to cover like the expenses and potentially income that will come into your bank account? But, you know, you can set up as a sole trader, you can set it up as a partnership, you can set it up as a unit trust. And, you know, of course there's liabilities there in terms of like getting your tax files, filed every year. And you have to, if you're a company, you have to pay an annual fee to keep the company register, for example. So a few things to think about in terms of what to get advice from your accountant.
I might actually dive a bit deeper into that one. That one was, I actually started with consulting my accountant / tax advisor, because you might be on a really high like income and it might make sense for you to actually start as a company too. You have to really consider your tax benefits as well. And in terms of whether you should set up as a sole trader versus as a company or as a partnership. That's one of the things to think about. And then the second thing as well that was quite important is insurance. Like I had to purchase insurance to cover myself as like a teacher. And I think that when you operate as a sole trader, you would, or offering any type of service, I think that's something that you would really need to consider. And how you register your taxes as well, because you don't have a company paying your super for you. You have to manage all of that yourself. And setting up bank accounts. Do you want it all to come out of your own like daily bank account, or do you want it to come out of a separate business account? There's a lot to consider. And I'm sure that there's an Etsy template out there for you to use.
Yeah, and from a legal perspective as well, like if your side hustle is something that will require some sort of separation between your personal assets and your sort of business assets, then it's a no-brainer to start a company, right? Because you don't want, you know, in case something goes wrong and, you know, it won't affect you as an individual, just the company itself. So tax and legal advice is very important to think about.
And deciding how much you want to invest up front too. So for example, for us, we had to decide like that if we wanted to do this, we would have to put in a bit of money and capital to get it started.
We needed a lot of equipment to get started, and that's probably the crux of where our costs went. Was the equipment we needed to record, the microphones, the stands, the audio interface. We're using a personal laptop, so as long as you've got a laptop, that's fine. And then maybe eventually you'd upgrade to one once you have enough income to offset it. Coming back to the bank account piece is also, if you keep things separate, it makes it a lot easier for you to manage rather than you going through your day-to-day and having to cross out, okay, this one was for work, this one was personal. It's just easier to manage, especially between three of us.
And then outside of like physical equipment, you need to think about the software that you use as well. Like coming from a tech background, like we're very aware of that. Like for example, if I want to start an e-commerce business, I think about like how I do my marketing solutions, how I do my CRM. You know, like, and there's so many different solutions out there that provide free tiers, so they're all freemium. So you know, up to a certain amount of usage or up to a number of like emails or whatever, they're free.
MailChimp,
and so
MailChimp is one a lot of startups will start using because it is on that freemium.
But highly recommend to like use those free versions because just to make your life easier too, like in terms of automating some of the tasks that you have to do. Lots to think about, but you know, if you're on the cusp of like or launching a business that is very exciting, is, you know, it's gonna take a lot of work. It's like having a new baby. Like you're gonna have to invest.
It is a baby, and you have to love
feed the
that
baby.
baby.
You have to make sure the baby is surviving, but you know, at the same time, it's very exciting. If you are up for some inspirations, for example, like I was such a nerd a few years ago and I listened to like a few podcasts about side hustle, and there's one called the Side Hustle School. Each episode they actually invite someone new to talk about what they started. And if you're just keen to get started but you haven't got an idea yet, I would highly recommend that. Highly recommend reading Tim Ferriss's books as well, especially the 4-Hour Work Week, and how, you know, like if you want to have that sort of financial free lifestyle, then you want to set up something that doesn't require your hours to put in, and you can be away while the business is still running, for example. KP and Jules, to close things out, anything else would recommend our readers or our listeners to look into?
One I'm listening to now because I'm doing all my TikTok and Instagram stuff is called the Social Marketing Podcast, and it's awesome. It talks about all these little tips that you can get from how do you actually take advantage of TikTok, how do you take advantage of Instagram, because they're actually two completely different strategies. And also, if you're not on Facebook, what are the key strategies for Facebook? Where are the quick wins? What are the things that you can do today that doesn't cost you much? It's actually really handy because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And these ladies, men have been doing it for years and years. Like one I listened to the other day where they actually started like a private dining event where they would just invite expats to come and dine with me at my home, and I'll cook you a nice dinner, but you had to register and it was exclusive for only a handful of people. But then they went so viral and got so many following that they ended up opening a restaurant. But then it completely failed after a couple of years, and they had like this poker investor or something that just gave them, here's a bit of cash, go and do your thing. Completely failed because none of them knew how to run a business.
I think
so. Anyway, it's just a really good podcast and great insights. So check it out. Social media marketing podcast.
And that's probably a good reality check as well, right? Like to think you can start something and it might not end up being anything at all,
Yeah.
but that's still an experience that you will
Learn from.
you will learn
Yeah.
from, and you will take something out of that. But I guess the moral of the story is don't quit your day job yet.
Until until it's the right time for
Yeah.
you. In a very
You will know.
slow
You
one.
will know
Yeah.
when the right time is, and you will evaluate exactly where your side hustle has gotten up to, especially for us. Like, what is that point where we go, actually, we could do this full time? We've got X amount of followers and listeners, and we've got X amounts of sponsors. Imagine
Let's
that.
not get ahead of
Yeah.
ourselves
Imagine
here.
that.
Yeah. I've got one piece of advice to just round it out, and that is just get started.
Yes.
I think that is probably, if you're there thinking about it, and you've been thinking about it maybe for longer than 6 months, so just go out there and get started. Then you can see how much time and effort it'll take you. But I think that is the biggest hurdle is getting started. So
Yeah.
go
I
out
think-
there and do it.
I think I can relate that back to dating. I can't believe I'm doing this because usually it's TT that relates everything back to dating, but it's just like going on the apps. Just get started. Just find those leads, qualify them out.
And
work
you might
out-
surprise yourself.
Exactly.
You might surprise
And maybe
yourself.
dating apps is not for you, and that's fine too.
Yeah.
But you kind of have to try something. And like the thing is, like, it's much better to start something than wait for everything to be perfect. Like
Yes.
perfect timing, perfect condition, like perfect, like period of the year.
Yeah.
And like things would change. Like nothing would be perfect forever, or all the variables that affect the business will come up. So
It goes back to experience, because if you're not experienced, you don't know how to run a business. How are you going to learn if you don't just go and do it? Yeah, sure, you might fail a couple of times, but you come back, reevaluate, take all those learnings. Okay, I wasn't very good at finances. I wasn't good at operating a business. What do I need? What other skills do I need? Go and network, find people to help you, restart, get back up on your feet, and have the right people. I will rather be surrounded by the right people so
Yeah.
that you have all of those skills ready to go.
yeah. And you know what? We just want our listeners to be happy. So
you can do it.
you do you, and whatever you do, just be happy, and we'll be happy.
Oh, I'm going to take TT's saying here, but go live your best life. Thank you for listening to today's podcast all about side hustles. We hope that we've sparked a few ideas, as well as help you perhaps think about what your side hustles could be. Feel free to reach out to us on our socials if you have any questions on what we're currently doing. But next week's episode is actually, we're bringing in a friend of KP's who has gone out and started a side hustle. And you're going to hear live really on her key experiences, what challenges she went through, where the areas she could potentially improve, why and how she got started, but also how she quit her corporate role. That's what I'm really keen to hear about, because that's a huge thing to go and do, is move away from said golden handcuffs, right? And that security piece. Tune in. Don't forget to subscribe on our socials. You've been listening to
Let's Take It Offline.